They put me next to the coat rack at my own sister's wedding. That was the moment I knew if I stayed silent one more time, I'd lose myself for good. What happened next didn't just change the wedding, it changed my family forever. The envelope arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, nestled between a water bill and a supermarket coupon. It was cream-colored, thick, and expensive, the kind of paper chosen for only two kinds of news weddings and lawsuits. Claire Weston stared at it for a full minute before reaching for the letter opener on the counter. Her name was written in calligraphy sharp and elegant. Claire L. Weston. The L curled at the tail like a little flourish Ava would have insisted on. Of course it was from Ava. She slid the blade through the seal and unfolded the card. The words were embossed formal, dripping with curated joy. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Ava Weston and Ethan Bennett, September 17th, Lakeview Resort, Vermont. No note. No, scribbled, can't wait to see you or hope you'll come. Just the same glossy message everyone else received. Claire set the invitation down and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She stared out the window past the backyard fence where the wind shook the pine trees like secrets being whispered. The light in late summer had a tired softness to it, the kind that made everything feel nostalgic, even if you weren't sure why. Ava hadn't called. Not to tell her the news, not to check in, not even to pretend the distance between them wasn't real. The last time they'd spoken, truly spoken, was nearly 3 years ago at their mother's birthday brunch. Claire had brought a gift, a handmade photo frame. Ava hadn't looked at it. She had been too busy telling a story about her new promotion, one Claire already knew from Facebook. No blow-up, no fight, just a slow fade, the kind that hurts more because you can't blame anyone but yourself for waiting. Claire was 37. She lived alone in a modest townhome outside Concord, New Hampshire. She worked in biomedical research, kept succulents alive with obsessive care, and painted on Sunday mornings with jazz playing low in the background. Her life was quiet, structured, and sometimes lonely, but not desperate, not broken. She had learned long ago that love wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silent support. But in her family, silence had meant something else, distance. You were always the calm one, her mother Judith often said. So easy. So reliable. Claire had grown up believing that being low maintenance was the only way to earn affection. She didn't cry loudly, she didn't ask for help, she didn't take up space. And somewhere along the way, she had convinced herself that was noble. But noble didn't mean seen. She picked up the invitation again, tracing the embossed letters with her fingertip. She remembered a birthday she must have been 9 or 10. Ava had gotten a new bike pink with glitter streamers. Claire got a book. No card, no note. You're the reader, her mother had said. You like books. She had smiled. She had said thank you. She had never asked for anything different. Now, decades later, she still didn't ask. But that didn't mean she didn't want. For days, she left this invitation on the counter as though waiting for it to say something more. It didn't. Her friend Lena called. Are you seriously thinking about going? She asked, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. You know how they make you feel. I'm not going for them, Claire said. I'm going for me. She didn't explain further. There were things about being forgotten that only those who'd lived it would understand. How much energy it took to pretend not to care. How a hallway seat, a forgotten gift, a skipped thank you could echo for years. In the end, she clicked yes on the RSVP. Chose chicken, marked no on +1. Then she walked to the fridge, lifted a magnet, and pinned the invitation beneath it. Not because she was excited, because she needed to remember. Not what they had done, but that she was strong enough to walk in anyway. Claire arrived at the Lakeview Resort just as the morning sun began to warm the slate stone pathway leading to the main entrance. The air held that crispness only early autumn could bring, somewhere between the warmth of a memory and the chill of something unfinished. From a distance, the venue looked unreal. White canopies stretched over manicured lawns. A string quartet rehearsed in a corner of the garden. Inside, everything glimmered. Crystal chandeliers, tall centerpieces, linen-covered tables, each one whispering belonging to someone else. Claire took a breath and walked inside. At the welcome table, a young woman in a black blazer greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Name, please, Claire Weston. A pause, a scan. The woman's fingers danced over a list, then stopped. Her eyes flicked up. Ah, you're at table H. That's in the hallway just outside the main ballroom near the coat check. Claire's heart didn't lurch. It constricted, quietly, like it had been rehearsing for this. I'm sorry, where she asked. The hallway, the woman repeated, her voice even professional. There's signage. Claire looked toward the grand ballroom where light spilled through the open doors. Inside, she could see guests laughing, hugging, clinking champagne glasses. She took a breath, nodded, and walked to the large easel displaying the seating chart. Her eyes searched faster now. Judith and Walter Weston, her parents, sat at table 1 right beside Ava and Ethan. Ava's high school best friend had a spot. So did Ethan's coworkers, Ava's yoga instructor. Even second cousins Claire hadn't seen since grade school. Her name was near the bottom. Claire Weston, table H, hallway. She stood still, her expression blank. Inside, she wasn't surprised. She was only hurt. The hallway table was small. Just 2 chairs pushed to the side near a brass coat stand. A tiny vase with a single white rose sat awkwardly in the center, trying too hard. Claire didn't sit. She turned and walked back toward the main room. She found them near the front, Judith adjusting the folds of Ava's dress. Ava glowing, laughing, perfect. Mom, Claire said softly. Can I speak with you? Judith barely looked up. Claire, please, not now. Just a moment. With a sigh, Judith stepped aside. Ava stayed where she was watching with that smile Claire had come to know well, wide and controlled. I've been seated in the hallway, Claire said. Judith raised her brows. Yes, there wasn't space in the main room. We had to prioritize close family. I'm close family. Claire, Judith said, voice thinning. Let's not make this a thing. Ava's voice chimed in. It must have been a logistics thing. Nothing personal. Claire looked at her sister. It feels personal. Ava shrugged. You haven't exactly been involved, Claire. You show up and vanish. You don't invite me. Claire replied, quieter now. You never have. Judith crossed her arms. Why do you always need to make everything about you? You should be grateful you were invited at all. That word again. Grateful. Like a favor had been done. Like it was mercy to be included even peripherally. Claire didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply said, thank you for clarifying, and turned. Back at the hallway table, Claire sat down. Odson. She didn't smooth her dress this time. She didn't pretend it was fine. She just stared at the place card in front of her, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she'd always suspected. And this wasn't a mistake. This was exactly where they believed she belonged. She turned the card over in her hand, fingers trembling not from rage but from clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't scream, it just settles in your bones. Behind her, the music swelled again. Inside, a cheer erupted. Probably the photographer's cue. Ava would be making her grand entrance. Claire didn't move, because maybe the real entrance she needed to make wasn't into their world, but out of their shadow. And maybe that started ironically right here, in the hallway, where she had always been. Only now she finally saw it, and she was done pretending it didn't hurt. It had happened years ago. Claire couldn't remember exactly when, maybe 5, 6 years back, but she remembered the light that day, soft and golden as it filtered through the kitchen curtains at her parents' house. She was visiting for Thanksgiving. Ava wasn't there off traveling with some boyfriend to Portugal or Peru. It was one of the rare holidays Claire had her childhood home to herself. For once, the air felt still, not full of performance, no high heels echoing off hardwood, no perfume lingering in doorways like expectation. Her mother, Judith, had asked her to look for some old family photos once to be scanned for a memory album. Claire had nodded and gone upstairs to the room that hadn't changed in 20 years, the same faded lilac walls, the twin bed by the window, the bookshelf that still held her high school trophies, debate mathlete, perfect attendance, all things no one had ever clapped for. She knelt by the dresser and opened the bottom drawer, rummaging through a tangle of photo envelopes and yellowed newspaper clippings. Then, without much thought, she opened the top drawer of her mother's vanity. Just to see. That was where she found it, a small leather-bound notebook, light brown with a soft, worn texture that suggested frequent handling. No title, just a simple gold clasp. Claire unhooked the clasp and opened it. The first page was dated August 23rd, 1996. She began to read. The first day Ava went to kindergarten, she didn't cry. She turned, waved goodbye, and ran into the classroom like a brave little doll. Claire turned the page. Ava loves the baked pasta I make on Thursday nights. She always asks for seconds. Another, Ava was scared of thunderstorms, but she's getting better. She said she's not afraid if I hold her hand. Each page was a time capsule. Ava's birthdays, her fears, her favorite books. Ava's flu, her first bike ride, her tooth fairy notes. It was a mother's voice, tender and full, wrapping memory and affection. Claire kept flipping. Faster now. She wasn't angry. She was looking for herself. One mention, one moment. But there was nothing. Page after page, Ava. Only Ava. No Claire, not a word. Her throat tightened. Her fingertips shook as she closed the book gently and sat on the floor. Legs folded, the notebook resting in her lap like something sacred she had no right to touch. When Judith walked in moments later, carrying a box of old photos, she stopped. "Oh," she said. "You found that." Claire didn't look up. "You wrote all of this about Ava." Her mother nodded casual. "I wanted to remember everything. She's always been so sensitive." Claire's voice was quiet, almost careful. "There's nothing about me." Judith didn't flinch. She walked to the bed and sat down, adjusting her sweater like she always did when answering something she didn't see as important. "You didn't need to be written about, Claire. You were always strong. You didn't need reminders." Claire nodded, said nothing more. But something inside her had cracked then, not a violent break, not a collapse, a quiet shift. Like realizing the room you grew up in never had your name on the door. She hadn't told anyone about that day, not even Lena. She had carried it silently like a stone in her pocket, small but heavier every time she remembered. Now seated at table H by the coat check, her fingers brushed the edge of her purse. And it came back sharp and full. That moment in the room, her mother's easy dismissal, the ache of looking for proof that you were remembered and finding none. And yet the most painful part wasn't the absence, it was the certainty that her mother hadn't even realized. She hadn't forgotten Claire out of cruelty. She had simply never thought to remember her. Claire stared at the flickering votive candle in front of her. Around her, the hallway bustled with distant footsteps, laughter from the ballroom, and the occasional brush of cold air as the door to the terrace opened. But she was still in that upstairs bedroom holding a book that had her mother's handwriting all over it and none of her. She wasn't crying. She just felt seen. Not by others, but by herself. And maybe that was the beginning of something that mattered more. Claire sat at the small table beside the coat check, her hands wrapped around a glass of sparkling water that had long since gone flat. The sounds from the ballroom swirled around her, music, laughter, the clinking of cutlery, but none of it seemed real from her place on the edge of it all. She didn't check her phone. She didn't look at the door. She simply sat still, as if movement might dissolve the quiet resolve holding her upright. Then footsteps. She looked up. Ethan Bennett, the groom, was standing a few feet away, his jacket unbuttoned, tie slightly loosened. In his hand was a half-empty glass of champagne. He looked surprised to find her there and maybe a little relieved. "Claire," he said softly. "Mind if I sit?" She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "It's not exactly reserved." He chuckled, but it was hollow. For a moment, they sat in silence. "I didn't expect to find you here," he said. "Eventually." "I didn't expect to be here," she replied. "But here we are." Ethan looked down at his glass, then back at her. "Can I ask you something? And I mean this sincerely." Claire nodded once. He leaned forward slightly, voice lower now. "Have you ever noticed anything about Ava? Something that felt off?" Claire blinked. "That's a broad question." "I know," he said quickly. "It's just the past few months she's changed. Little things. She gets upset when I ask questions about money. She deletes texts. She controls when we see my family, and I keep thinking maybe it's wedding stress. But maybe it's not." Claire didn't answer right away. This was the moment. She could say, "I wouldn't know," and let it go. Stay neutral, maintain the lifelong habit of making herself invisible to avoid being called dramatic. But she didn't. She took a breath and spoke. "She's always been like that," Claire said, voice even. "She just used to do it in smaller ways. With family, with friends. People didn't notice because she smiles while she does it. And because when you're not the one being managed, it doesn't feel like control." Ethan looked stunned. He didn't speak, just stared at her, waiting. Claire continued slower now. "She's charming, strategic. When we were younger, she could make our parents turn against me with just a comment. Something light, a joke. And suddenly I was the one who had to apologize for ruining the mood. He exhaled like he'd been holding it for weeks. I thought maybe I was imagining things, he said, or overreacting. No, Claire said gently. You're not. They sat in that stillness together for a beat. Claire could feel the heaviness in his posture, the kind that came not from betrayal itself, but from the validation of it. Like a truth you hoped wasn't real had just been confirmed. I never thought she could be cruel, Ethan said. But now I'm wondering if she's just careful. Claire looked at him and, for the first time since arriving at the wedding, felt something unexpected connection. I don't want to hurt her, he added. I just want to know what's true. Claire's voice was softer now. Wanting the truth doesn't make you cruel. He nodded. Thank you for not pretending. Claire gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. It's not something I've done well pretending. Not really, just stayed quiet. Ethan stood slowly. He looked different now, not stronger, not clearer, just aware. I think I needed to talk to someone who wasn't under her spell, he said. Claire raised her glass slightly. Glad I could help ruin a perfectly orchestrated day. He smiled, genuine this time. Or maybe just help make it more honest. Then he left footsteps soft against the carpeted hall. Claire remained at the table, not proud, not vindicated, just lighter. Because after a lifetime of silence, she had finally told the truth. And it hadn't shattered her. The soft click of the conference room door was almost elegant, like the closing of a jewelry box. But what it locked in wasn't gold or silk. It was something colder, heavier. Claire stood just inside arms wrapped around her waist like armor. She wasn't supposed to be here, not really, but Ethan had asked her to come. And for the first time, she didn't feel like saying no. Ethan sat at the head of the long table, his tuxedo impeccable, but his expression anything but. He looked like a man trying to stay calm during a fire. Beside him stood Celeste Bennett, poised and immovable in a navy evening gown. In one hand, she held a folder. Thin, tidy, dangerous. The door opened again. Judith entered first, her heels muffled against the thick carpet. Then Ava, luminous in her gown veil, trailing behind her like a ghost that hadn't quite left. What's going on? Ava asked, her voice clipped with irritation. Ethan, we're losing light for the photos. Ethan rose. We need to talk. Ava's brow furrowed. Talk about what? About the truth. Celeste stepped forward and laid the folder on the table. We've read your messages, Ava. All of them. Ava didn't reach for it. Messages, yes, Celeste said. The ones you sent to your friends, to your stylist, to your divorce attorney. Ava laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Are you serious? You went through my private stuff? They weren't sent to us, Celeste replied coolly. They were forwarded, accidentally, by a vendor you never thought would read them. Judith frowned. What messages? Ethan opened the folder and spread out the pages. She's been planning this for months. A strategic marriage, a controlled image, and a quick, clean exit when the time is right. That's not true, Ava said, voice rising. This is twisted, taken out of context. You wrote, Celeste said, reading aloud, once the wedding is over, I'll phase him out. Sweetness is easy when they're predictable. Ava's face drained of color. Claire sat perfectly still. Not triumphant, just steady. This wasn't her war, but it felt like something had finally found its rightful place. I was venting. Ava snapped. Everyone says dumb things. You hired a divorce lawyer? Ethan said, his voice like quiet thunder. You made financial plans that excluded me. You told people this house, my home, would be yours in 6 months. Judith looked between them, confused, desperate. Ava, tell me this is a mistake. Ava swallowed. I was scared. Okay, I didn't want to lose control. I've seen marriages fall apart. I was protecting myself. By lying? Ethan asked. By using me? No, she insisted. I love you. Ethan didn't flinch. Then why was your love a strategy? Silence fell. The kind of silence that sits behind the eyes before someone cries or someone breaks. Judith finally found her voice. I didn't know. Claire looked at her mother. Of course you didn't. You never wanted to. Judith turned sharply. Claire, this isn't about you. Claire held her gaze. Isn't it? It's about pretending things are fine when they never were. It's about looking away, again. Ava whipped around. You don't get to sit there and judge me. You were never part of this family. Not really. Claire didn't even blink. Then why am I here now? That stopped Ava. Just for a second. Because I let you come, she whispered. Ethan shook his head. No, Ava. Because Claire's the only one here who told me the truth. Ava's mask began to slip. Her breath came faster. Her fingers trembled around the edge of the table. You're all turning on me. No, Celeste said. You turned away from yourself. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope. This is an annulment petition. I've already signed it. Judith gasped. Ethan, he turned to her. I deserve better than manipulation. Ava's voice cracked. You think you're punishing me, but you're just proving what I already knew no one ever stays. Claire stood then, slowly, calmly. She didn't need to say much, but she did say this, maybe no one stayed because you never let them see you. Ava looked at her sister like she was seeing a ghost. And then the tears came, not loud, not dramatic, just real. She turned and walked out, veil dragging behind her like something being pulled back by gravity. The door clicked shut once more, and this time no one stopped it. The music had shifted by the time they returned to the main hall, strings replacing the upbeat melodies. Glasses half full, laughter resuming like nothing had cracked the day. But something had. Ethan stepped through the double doors first, followed by Celeste and Claire. His steps were slow but certain. He no longer looked like a man doubting his choices. He looked like someone walking toward the truth. Ava was already standing at the center of the reception hall, flanked by a photographer and a few confused bridesmaids. Her expression brightened when she saw Ethan until she noticed who was with him. Ethan, she asked, voice carefully pitched to maintain normalcy. What's going on? The hall quieted. Guests turned, wine glasses hovering in midair. Eyes scanned from Ethan to Celeste to Claire, then landed curiously on the bride. Ethan raised a hand gently to the crowd. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, his voice calm and resonant, but I have something I need to say. Ava's posture stiffened. This wedding, Ethan continued, is no longer taking place. A collective gasp. A hand dropped a napkin. A distant clink of silverware. Ava blinked. What are you talking about? I'm annulling the marriage, he said. Effective immediately. Whispers rippled through the room like wind through dry leaves. Ava turned toward the crowd. This is ridiculous. It's not true. He's confused. He's been manipulated. She looked directly at Claire. She did this. My sister, the jealous shadow. She poisoned everything. Claire didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply stepped forward and said, her voice as soft as it was unshakable. The truth carries its own weight. Silence. Then someone stood in the back. Celeste's husband. Then a friend of the groom. Then a few more. Their expressions weren't angry, just tired of pretending. Ava's hands trembled. You want to shame me? Embarrass me in front of everyone? Ethan shook his head. No, I want to stop lying, that's all. She looked around the room. The admiration that had filled the space earlier, the compliments on her dress, the praise for her flowers, was gone. Not because they hated her, but because they finally saw her. And perhaps that was worse. Ava turned to Judith. Mom, say something. Judith was frozen, one hand pressed to her chest. Mom, Ava's voice cracked. Tell them I'm not the villain. Judith swallowed. Her eyes darted from Ethan to Claire, then back to her younger daughter. I don't know who you are right now, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ava stepped back as if struck. I thought I did, Judith continued. But maybe I never really looked. Ava's shoulders sank. Claire watched her mother, something shifting inside her. Not triumph, not even closure, just recognition. After years of screaming inside her silence, she had finally been heard without raising her voice. Ava turned once more to Claire. Her makeup was smudged, hair falling from its pins. You've always hated me, she whispered. Claire shook her head. No, I just stopped pretending you were someone else. For a moment, it looked like Ava might say more, but she didn't. She turned and walked out of her own wedding. This time, no one followed. The train ride home was quiet. Claire sat by the window, the blur of trees and telephone poles slipping past like thoughts she no longer wanted to chase. The wedding dress, the ruined reception, the silence that followed Ava's collapse. All of it drifted behind her, dissolving like smoke in the fall light. She hadn't spoken much after the confrontation. There had been no shouting, no dramatic speeches, just truth, delivered quietly, with the kind of stillness that left no room for denial. Ava had walked out. Ethan had stayed calm. Judith had stared at the floor. Now the weight of that silence traveled with her, not heavy but grounding. Back home, her townhouse greeted her like a favorite sweater. Soft lighting, the subtle scent of eucalyptus, the distant hum of the heater kicking in. Claire made tea without thinking. She moved around the kitchen like muscle memory, not needing decisions. It was in the simplicity of the act, the boiling water, the cup on its chipped saucer, that she found a strange peace. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't even look at it. By now, she had 9 missed calls from her mother, 1 from her father, a long text from Ethan, and a new voicemail from Ava. She didn't open any of them, not out of bitterness, but because she didn't need answers. Not anymore. The next day, she walked to the market. The air was crisp, the sidewalks dusted with fallen leaves. She picked out apples and rosemary and stood for a long time in the spice aisle, just because no one needed her to be anywhere else. At home, she made soup. Read a few pages of a novel she'd started 3 times and never finished. Rearranged her bookshelf, moving poetry to the top shelf, not because it mattered, but because it pleased her. She thought about the word peace. It wasn't a surrender, she realized. It wasn't quiet because nothing hurt. It was quiet because she had finally stopped performing. That evening, she lit a candle and opened her journal. She hadn't written since the night before the wedding. Now, she let her pen move freely. No prompts, no expectations. Just this, I don't need closure. I need peace. And I choose it every time I stay silent, when I once would have begged. She let that sentence sit there, then wrote, I used to think love was earned through endurance, but maybe love is recognizing when to let go. On the 3rd day, she stood by the window with her tea and looked at her phone again. 9 missed calls, 3 voicemails. She opened one. Judith's voice was tentative. Claire, I don't know where to start. There was a pause. I'm sorry. I don't know if that's enough, but I wanted to say it. Call me if you can. Claire didn't feel the jolt she once would have, didn't feel the old hunger for reconciliation. She felt still. She didn't call back. Instead, she folded laundry, played Coltrane on the record player, took a long bath. She spent time with herself, not because she was lonely, but because she liked her own company. She wasn't waiting for them to change. She had changed. She had discovered a secret only those who had been left behind learn peace doesn't arrive. You create it. In every choice not to argue. In every text left unread. In every breath that doesn't ask for someone else's permission. And that silence, it wasn't empty anymore. It was finally hers. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday morning, slipped quietly into her mail slot between a heating bill and a catalog of fall jackets. Claire almost didn't notice it at first. It was cream-colored, no logo, no handwriting, just her name printed in small, deliberate font, Claire Weston. She brought it inside and let it rest on the kitchen counter as she made her tea. She didn't feel the flutter of curiosity she once would have. No rush to open. No anxiety. Just a quiet, steady interest. Only after her tea had steeped and she'd settled by the window did she reach for the letter. The paper inside was thick and folded, once centered with precision. The words were typed, but the signature was handwritten. Dear Claire, I don't know if this letter will ever say enough, but I want to thank you. Not for what you did, but for how you did it. Your dignity, your calm, your refusal to retaliate when you could have it changed everything. Not just for Ethan, but for all of us who were too blinded by charm to see clearly. You didn't shout, you didn't storm. But your presence in that room cut through more than anger ever could. I've watched many people lose themselves trying to keep peace. But you found yourself by refusing to stay quiet any longer. Thank you for being the mirror we all needed. With respect, Celeste Bennett. Claire read the letter once, then again, and then folded it carefully and walked to the refrigerator. She pinned it up with a simple round magnet next to a grocery list and a photo of her as a child in a red sweater. It didn't look out of place. She didn't hang it for pride. She hung it as a reminder. Not that she had been right, but that she had been enough. Later that evening, as she made dinner, her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Ethan. I thought you should know I've moved out of the house, staying with friends, working on the paperwork. Therapy starts next week. Thank you for the clarity. Hope you're well. Claire stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I am. Finally, take care of yourself. And that was it. No further conversation. Just mutual respect between two people who had seen the same storm and walked away in different directions intact. That night, Claire lit a candle and curled up in her reading chair. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Inside, everything was still. She looked once more at the letter on her fridge. There had been no parade, no applause, no big moment where she got everything she wanted. But somehow that made it more real, because dignity doesn't come from who claps. It comes from who you are when no one's watching, and sometimes that quiet truth is what echoes longest. The message came on a quiet Sunday morning. Claire was watering her plants when the notification lit up her phone screen. Mom, if you're willing, I'd like to have coffee, just the two of us, no expectations, just time. She stared at the message for a long while, her fingers still damp from the soil. She thought about the dozens of missed calls, the strained silences, the things said, the things left unsaid. And then she replied, Okay, tomorrow, 10 a.m., that old cafe on Spruce Street. The next morning, Claire arrived early. The cafe was mostly empty, just the soft hum of conversation and the hiss of milk steaming behind the counter. She chose a table by the window, not tucked away, not hidden. When Judith entered, she looked different, smaller somehow, as if the weight of everything had finally settled on her shoulders. Claire, she said softly, setting her bag down. Thank you for coming. Claire nodded. You asked. I came. They ordered. Coffee black for Claire, herbal tea for Judith. The waitress didn't linger. For a moment, they sat in silence, the kind that was once awkward but now felt necessary. Then Judith spoke. I've been thinking about everything, replaying it over and over. Claire didn't interrupt. I always thought I saw both my daughters, Judith continued. I really believed I treated you fairly. You didn't, Claire said calm. But I understand why you believe that. Judith winced slightly but nodded. I confused your silence with strength. I thought you didn't need anything from me. I didn't say much, Claire admitted, but it wasn't because I didn't feel. It was because every time I did speak up, it was easier for everyone if I didn't. Judith looked down. I'm sorry, Claire nodded. Thank you, but I'm not here for that. Judith looked up. I'm not here to rebuild what we didn't have, Claire said. I'm not angry. I just don't want to carry it anymore. Judith's eyes welled slightly. So, what does this mean for us? Claire stirred her coffee. It means I'm not shutting the door, but I'm not pretending the past didn't happen either. I need space, honesty, not a picture-perfect version of love. There was a long pause. And then Judith whispered, I see you now. Claire looked at her. I really do. Judith said, I see how much you gave without being seen, how often you waited. Claire didn't cry. She simply gave a small nod. And when Judith reached out her hand, tentative, trembling, Claire didn't take it. Not out of cruelty, but because healing didn't need to look like reconciliation. Sometimes peace was just a quiet table, a real conversation, and the freedom to walk away without bitterness. When they parted, there was no hug, just understanding. And for Claire, that was enough. The ocean was never part of Claire's plan. But then again, neither was starting over. She had found the little town on a whim, a coastal village tucked between rocky cliffs and wildflower fields. It had no chain stores, no skyscrapers, no noise that lingered. Just salt in the air, paint-chipped fences, and the distant, endless sound of the sea. Claire rented a cottage with white shutters and uneven floorboards. The backyard opened into dunes. The front porch creaked with every gust of wind. It was perfect. She unpacked slowly, carefully. Not because there was much to move, but because she was rearranging her life piece by piece. Her paintbrushes came out last. They had lived in a box under her bed for years. Now she laid them gently on the windowsill beside jars of old pigment and blank canvases. For the first time in a long while, they felt like tools instead of ghosts. Each morning, she walked to the beach before sunrise. Not for exercise, not for ritual, but because it reminded her of impermanence. The tide never asked for permission to change, it just did. In the afternoons, she painted landscapes at first, then colors with no names, then stories she didn't know she had been carrying. A neighbor stopped by one day, then another. One suggested she show her work at the local gallery. Claire almost said no, but something in her had softened. A few months later, she stood quietly in a small corner of that gallery, a glass of cider in hand, watching strangers pause in front of her work. Some tilted their heads. Some moved on quickly. One stood for a long time, wiping her eye before turning away. Claire didn't speak. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Because her story was there, layered in the brushstrokes, folded in color, stitched into silence. She walked toward one painting at the end of the row. It was smaller than the others. A woman by a window, eyes half closed, sunlight spilling across her hands. There was no title on the card beside it. No price. It wasn't for sale. Claire smiled. Not because someone else had noticed it, but because she had, and that was enough. She stepped back, took one last sip of her drink, and turned toward the door. The sea air greeted her like an old friend. Behind her, the painting remained. Still, whole, seen or unseen. And no one needed to clap for her to know it meant something. The rain came gently that morning, tapping against the windows like a soft memory trying to return. She picked up her pen. Dear me, I'm writing to you, the version of me who stood still too many times, who smiled when it hurt, who left things unsaid because no one asked, who thought love was earned by being quiet, agreeable, small. I remember how hard you tried to fit into rooms that were already full. I remember the ache of watching people glance over your shoulder, talking around you like you were furniture. She thought of Ava, of Judith, of the way silence had once been her sanctuary and then her cage. You were not weak. You were surviving. You were reading the room like a second lang. She breathed slowly, her hand moving again. You don't owe them your voice. You owe it to yourself. To speak, to paint, to stand in sunlight with... She looked around her cottage. Her paintings leaned against the walls. Her dog snored gently near the stove. There was no applause, no audience, and still peace. You didn't need to prove your pain for it to be real. You didn't need to bleed to deserve care. You didn't need a tragedy to be seen. A lump caught in her throat. No, and you're still here. Not just breathing, living, painting, laughing at small things. Walk? She smiled softly. I love who we've become. Not because everything is fixed. Not because we finally won. But because we finally stopped waiting to be rescued. We rescued ourselves. The last lines came easily, without effort or flourish, with love and pride, Claire. She signed her name with a quiet confidence. Then she folded the letter. Not to send, not to show. She tucked it into the back of her journal beneath a dried flower and an old photograph. No one would read it, and that was exactly why it mattered.